Hello everyone and welcome to my Soap Twist 24 channel. I hope everyone is having a wonderful day. Before we begin, please hit the subscribe button and give this video a thumbs up. On that brisk December afternoon in 2025, the air inside Forrester Creations' sleek, glass-walled executive office was thick with anxiety. Steffi Forrester sat at her desk, her posture as flawless as ever, conveying the confidence of someone who knew she was born into the firm. Across from her was Hope Logan, her half-sister due to confusing family links, and opposite Hope sat Deke Sharp, her younger half-brother, and the son of Deacon Sharp. Deke had just lately carved out a niche for himself on the relaunched Hope for the Future line, with his creative designs infusing new life into the brand that bore Hope's name. But suddenly, everything was unraveling. Thomas Forrester had returned abruptly after his absence, marching back into the building as if he had never left, eager to resume his work as lead designer. Steffi, who was always devoted to her brother and the Forrester lineage, had made her decision clear. There was room for Thomas, but not for Deke. To succeed in the competitive fashion industry, the line needed proven skill, particularly family talent. Hope begged, claiming that Deke's new ideas deserved a shot and that the organization could accommodate both. But Steffi had shut it off firmly. "No, there's not," she answered, echoing her earlier sentiments when Hope begged for a spot on the team. Hope's cheeks flushed with rage and betrayal. The delicate peace she and Steffi had made, born of shared worry during Liam's health scare, was shattered in that moment. Hope had worked hard to resurrect her line after it had been shelved several times, putting her heart and everything into it as the face and visionary behind Hope for the Future. Deke, with his quiet persistence and sketches that combined modern edge with timeless elegance, had become her ally, representing her family in a firm dominated by Forresters. Losing him was like losing a part of herself. Deke stood still, his jaw clenched, processing the impact. He had told Hope earlier about his concerns when Thomas's return was announced, feeling a shift in the wind. It was no longer a dream. Steffi had delivered the news bluntly. Deke had a promising future, but not at Forrester Creations. It ached not only professionally, but also personally, to be dismissed as the pizzamaker's son, referring to his father Deacon's restaurant experience, rather than being judged solely on merit. As the conference concluded, Hope slowly gathered her belongings, her mind racing. She couldn't let this happen. The Logans and Sharps have long been considered outsiders in this community, tolerated but never entirely accepted. Katie Logan recently launched her own rival fashion brand, financed by Bill Spencer, thus opportunities arose elsewhere. Hope looked at Deke, the disappointment in his eyes echoing hers. This was more than simply a job. It was about respect, legacy, and the never-ending power battle between the Forresters and everyone else. They headed toward the door, Hope leading and Deke following. Hope hesitated just before entering the doorway, turning back to face Steffi for the final time. Steffi looked up from her desk, her manner cool and unyielding, anticipating another appeal or scream. But Hope's voice was calm and filled with quiet resolve. Deke nodded gently, standing next to sister. "We're done here, Steffi," Hope said, the 5 words cutting through the silence like a precisely fitted seam, sharp, final, and irrevocable. Steffi's eyes narrowed slightly, but she said nothing as Hope and Deke turned to leave the office, the door closing behind them. The corridor outside felt different, full of potential rather than confinement. Hope for the Future may still bear her name, but under Forrester's regulations, it will never truly be hers. With Deke by her side, Hope felt a burst of determination. Katie's new endeavor awaited, a place where Logans and Sharps could build without the Forrester shadows. As they rode the elevator down, Deke finally spoke. "What now, sis?" Hope smiled slightly, the weight lifted. "Now we begin something new. Something truly ours." The doors opened onto the bustling lobby of Forrester Creations, a place that had played host to so many wars in their lives. However, when they stepped outside into the Los Angeles sunshine, it felt like the end of one chapter and the start of another. Back at the office, Steffi leaned back in her chair, pondering her departure. She had protected her family, reinstated Thomas, and ensured the line's future, or so she thought. However, in the world of fashion and family feuds, nothing is ever truly secure. Rumors about Katie's competing mansion were already circulating, and losing Hope's star power may be costly. Steffi took up the phone and dialed her father Ridge, eager to discuss the relaunch. But a nagging uncertainty lingered. Had those 5 words truly changed everything? Down the street at Il Giardino, Deacon Sharp was wiping down the counter when his phone rang. It was Hope. "Dad, we need to talk. Deke and I were leaving Forrester." Deacon's expression tightened. His children were once again thrown out by the Forresters. He glanced at Sheila in the rear, but his thoughts were on family. "Come over," he called. "We'll figure this out together." The ripple effect started almost immediately. Brooke Logan was startled and enraged when she heard Hope's message. Ridge tried to downplay it, assuring her that it was business, but Brooke noticed a pattern. The Forresters were closing ranks and excluding the Logans. Katie, thriving in her new post as CEO of the Spencer-backed fashion brand, wasted no time. She called Hope that evening. "Bring your vision. Bring Deke's designs. We have room here for everything." Hope paused only briefly. The pull between family loyalty and artistic freedom was tremendous. The next morning, word traveled around the business that Hope Logan and Deke Sharp were leaving Forrester Creations to pursue a new endeavor. Steffi read the press release with amazement, the 5 words reverberating in her thoughts. "We're done here, Steffi." It wasn't simply a goodbye, but a proclamation of independence. Thomas dug into the drawings alongside Zend, eager to lead Hope for the future again. But without Hope as the face, the lines seemed hollow. Buyers questioned the direction, and supporters of the brand expressed bewilderment online. Steffi pushed on, desperate to show her decision correct. However, late at night, she wondered if pride had cost her more than she expected. Deke, on the other hand, thrived in less constrained environments. His sketches grew bolder and more personal. Hope mentored him, building on her years of expertise. Their partnership sparked something new, a collection that combined hope with edge, tradition and innovation. Katie's house gained traction, poaching talent and attracting attention. Bill Spencer smiled brightly, seeing his investment pay off in the rivalry with the Forresters. Months passed and collections debuted. The new brand, which may be dubbed Logan Sharp Couture or something as radical, debuted to great praise. Hope walked the runway again, dazzling, and Deke's design stole the show. Steffi watched from a distance, her own relaunch solid but lacking in excitement. Those 5 words sparked a transformation, demonstrating that sometimes leaving was the ultimate power move. In the end, Forrester Creations persevered, as it always has. But the landscape has shifted. Hope and Deke discovered a refuge away from the shadows. Steffi discovered that family legacy was more than just holding on, it was about adjusting. The drama continued, with feuds simmering and romances flickering. But on that day in December 2025, 5 simple words changed everything. "We're done here, Steffi." The story was filled with layers of emotion, including betrayal, empowerment, and resilience. Hope often reflected on the time when vulnerability transformed into strength. Deke gained confidence, and his talent was recognized without qualifications. Steffi, ever the fighter, planned comebacks. However, the exit remained a significant scene in the never-ending story of love, ambition, and family in the world of high fashion. Years later, Hope would smile as she told Beth or new allies about it. Those 5 words were not furious. Rather, they were freeing. They shut a door but opened a world. And amid the brave, beautiful turbulence of their lives, it made all the difference. The offices of Forrester Creations were abnormally quiet, the kind of silence that comes after a storm. The sun shone through the big glass windows, creating long, pale reflections on the polished flooring. Steffi Forrester stood at the executive desk, arms crossed tightly, her posture firm, but her eyes betrayed a maelstrom of emotions she refused to express. She had witnessed betrayals, scandals, and family feuds behind these walls, but this moment felt heavier than others. Hope Logan stood a few steps away, hands loosely clasped together, as if to ground herself. Leaving Forrester Creations was not an impulsive decision. It had come after weeks of sleepless nights, whispered doubts, and a growing knowledge that staying would entail losing bits of herself that she would never regain. Across from her stood Deacon Sharp, who leaned nonchalantly against the doorframe, his typical assurance dampened by an unusual restraint. He wasn't here as a repentant troublemaker or a restaurateur with a checkered history. He was here as a father, as a man who had finally figured out when to talk and when to choose his words carefully. Steffi broke the silence first. "I never thought it would end like this," she remarked, her voice firm but tinged with disappointment. "Not after everything we've been through." Hope returned her look. There was no rage, just sadness and resolution. "Neither did I," she answered softly. "But sometimes staying hurts more than leaving." Deacon shifted, feeling the emotional weight pushing down on both women. "Steffi," he replied, stepping forward, "this is not about abandoning you or the family legacy. It's about moving toward something healthier." Steffi inhaled softly, her mouth tightening. For years, Forrester Creations had been more than just a business. It was her inheritance, battleground, and sanctuary. Losing Hope's presence was like losing a piece of the future she had imagined, even if she would never confess it. And Deacon's involvement, no matter how well-intentioned, muddled matters even further. "I fought for Hope for the future," Steffi explained. "I battled for you, Hope. People say I didn't, but I did." Hope nodded, confirming Steffi's statement. "I know you did, and that is why it hurts so badly. But fighting for a line is not the same as fighting for respect." The air was dense with unspoken facts. Steffi looked from Hope to Deacon with a wary face. "Is that it?" she inquired. "Are you both done?" Deacon straightened, his tone calm but forceful. "We aren't done with you. We're done with the cycle." Hope took a short step closer to Steffi and lowered her voice. "I cannot keep showing my worth over and over. I need to choose myself right now." Steffi remained silent for a bit. Her silence said volumes, pride wounded, weakness carefully veiled. She had been raised to battle, win, and defend the Forrester name at whatever cost. But she had also been taught to recognize strength, even when it tested her. "You know what this company means," Steffi finally said. "If you walk away from it, people will talk," Hope said with a bittersweet smile. "They always do." Deacon looked at the clock on the wall. Time, as usual, was moving quicker than anyone wanted. "We should go," he said gently. Steffi's eyes flashed with surprise. "Just like that?" Hope inhaled deeply before seeing Steffi straight in the eyes. Years of competitiveness, collaboration, animosity, and respect came to a head at that point. She knew this would be the last thing she uttered here, the last words Steffi would hear ringing through the corridors. Deacon moved to stand with his daughter in a silent display of solidarity. They hesitated, as if silently agreeing on what needed to be spoken. Hope spoke first, her tone steady yet emotional. Deacon followed, and the two of them were united in their objective. They spoke 5 words. 5 simple words had far greater impact than any argument, litigation, or power battle. Steffi felt them hit her chest like a slow-burning reality that couldn't be ignored. For a brief moment, the room appeared to shrink, the walls closing in as Steffi pondered what she had just heard. She did not answer immediately. She could not. The words were neither cruel nor accusing. They were honest, which was what made them so effective. Hope held Steffi's eyes without waiting for forgiveness or approval. She'd already made peace with her decision. Deacon put a soothing hand on Hope's shoulder, pride in his gaze. Steffi gulped hard. "Do you really believe that?" she asked gently. Hope nodded. "With everything I am," Deacon said. "And someday, I believe you will as well." Steffi averted her gaze, blinking back emotion she rarely allowed herself to express. When she looked around, Hope and Deacon were already approaching the door. There was no emotional parting, yelling match, or last-minute reversal. Just the gentle sound of footsteps disappearing down the corridor. As the door closed behind them, Steffi sat motionless, the 5 words playing over and over in her thoughts. She didn't know if they were a warning, a promise, or a mirror reflecting her own decisions. She did know that Forrester Creations will never be the same. Outside, Hope halted, exhaling a breath she had not aware she was holding. "That was harder than I thought," she conceded. Deacon grinned softly. "The right choices usually are." She returned her gaze to the structure that had molded so much of her life. There was sadness, yes, but also relief and a quiet sense of hope that she hadn't felt in a long time. They went away together, leaving not only a firm, but also a chapter that had finally come to an end. The corridor outside the luxury suite felt longer than normal as Hope and Deacon walked, their footfall echoing softly against the marble floors. Neither of them talked for a few moments. Silence can convey more significance than comfort. For Hope, each step out from the workplace felt like removing a layer of her identity: designer, Forrester insider, mediator between big personalities. Letting go of that duty was terrifying, but also liberating. Deacon eventually ended the stillness. "Are you okay?" Hope nodded, but her eyes shimmered. "I believe so. I hadn't realized how much I was holding back until now." "That's how it normally works," he remarked. "You stay strong for so long that when you finally stop, it all comes rushing out." They got to the elevator, and Deacon hit the button. The gentle chime sounded louder than anticipated. Hope leaned back against the wall and closed her eyes briefly. Memories flooded her mind: late evenings sketching concepts, angry meetings that ended in compromise, and times when she felt she could genuinely make a difference within the Forrester empire. She had poured her heart and soul into Hope for the future, not just as a fashion label, but as a representation of her principles. Seeing it degraded, questioned, and nearly deleted had stung worse than she had previously admitted. "Do you believe I should have said more?" Hope asked gently. "Have I explained myself better?" Deacon shook his head.
No.
"You said precisely what needed to be said." Sometimes explaining simply gives folks more room to argue rather than listen. The elevator doors opened, and they entered. As the doors closed, Hope felt a strange finality settle over her. This was it. No more boardrooms. No more power plays masquerading as business decisions. She no longer felt as if she needed to earn her place every day. Back upstairs, Steffi remained motionless long after Hope and Deacon had left. The office felt emptier, colder. She gently approached the window, gazing out at the city below. Los Angeles stretched eternally, full of aspiration, reinvention, and second chances. She had always believed that strength meant standing your ground and refusing to yield. However, the 5 words stated by Hope and Deacon shook Steffi's belief in unexpected ways. She replayed the talk, scrutinizing every emotion and pause. There was no bitterness in Hope's eyes, only clarity. That bothered Steffi more than rage ever could. She was angry and knew how to fight. Certainty was more difficult to demolish. Steffi's phone vibrated on the desk. She ignored it at first, but eventually looked at the screen.
Ridge.
Of course. He always seemed to know when something was awry. She answered. Hope and Deacon just left. There was a slight silence at the other end. "Left as in?" "As in Forrester Creations," Steffi explained. "For good." Ridge groaned. Steffi tightened her jaw. "I was afraid of that." "Did you see this coming?" "I knew Hope was hurting," Ridge said thoughtfully. "I didn't think it would go this far." Steffi hung up soon after, refusing to discuss her decisions just yet. She needed time, which she rarely provided herself. Sitting at her desk, she looked at the Forrester logo engraved into the glass top. It had traditionally represented family, legacy, and power. It has come to represent loss as well. Down in the parking structure, Hope and Deacon arrived at Deacon's car. The midday sun was almost blinding in comparison to the office building's muted tones. Hope shut her eyes and took a long breath of fresh air. "So," Deacon asked, opening the passenger door for her, "what happens next?" Hope halted before entering. "I do not know yet. And for the first time, that does not frighten me." He smiled. "That's growth." Hope watched the building vanish in the rearview mirror as they drove out of the garage. She felt a stab of grief, but it was tempered by something stronger, a sense of control over her own future. Whatever happened next would be on her terms. Later that evening, Hope sat on her couch, wrapped up with a blanket and an unfinished cup of tea. Her phone rang constantly with texts from friends, colleagues, and even a few reporters who had already heard the news. She disregarded them all. Tonight was not about introducing herself to the world. Her thoughts shifted back to Steffi. Despite everything, Hope did not despise her. In a lot of ways, she understood her. They were both members of powerful families, raised to defend legacies larger than themselves. The distinction was that Hope had finally determined she did not want to be defined by one. She wondered if Steffi would ever get it. Across town, Steffi sat alone in her living room, a glass of wine left on the table. The place was quiet, the kind that prompted introspection. She reflected on her mother, her children, and the lessons she wanted to pass on. Did strength always imply victory? Or did it sometimes imply letting go? The 5 words rang in her head, refusing to fade. They were not an attack. They formed a boundary. For the first time, Steffi contemplated the notion that Hope's departure was a challenge to Forrester Creations, rather than a rejection. A struggle to adapt, listen, and cherish voices that did not always agree with her own. She exhaled softly and laid the glass aside. Tomorrow, there would be meetings, damage control, and strategy planning. The machine would continue moving. It always has. But something basic had changed, and Steffi knew it. Logan was no longer vying for a position at Forrester Creations. And Steffi Forrester was left to figure out what that really meant. As night settled over Los Angeles, 2 women faced a decision with far-reaching consequences. One walked forward into the unknown with optimism in her heart. The other stood still, realizing that holding on too tightly could cost more than letting go. They didn't know what the future held. However, both realized that nothing would ever be the same again.